said an entire galaxy can pivot around the actions of an individual.
So then you are one of those individuals, right? Harry is guiding you to keep the plan on course.
Because I'm what? Special?
Hey guys, Pete here. Today I'm going to do another book to show video for Foundation. I'm going to cover episodes 5 and 6. It's getting a little bit harder to do this. There's a lot of changes, a lot of things that are only in the show, and I'll cover those, but the real problem is that most of the things they're drawing from the story are connected to spoilers for the big picture. So I'll do what I did in my last video like this. I'll talk about things that have been passed up in the book already, and then I'll give you a second spoiler warning and just talk straight book spoilers in the last few minutes. There has been a lot more information about what the creators are trying to do. We had the AMA on Reddit from the showrunner David Goyer, which gave us a lot of insights into what he was thinking about. And then there are the official podcasts where they talk about specific details from each episode. The 5th installment of the show opened with a flashback to Gaal's time on Synnax. This had something that was pulled from a different character who was an important part of the prequels. We learned that Gaal's education and everyone else's on the planet had been interrupted when the Seer Church took over and started to cleanse the intellectuals. Then she got a hold of Callie's writing and appeared to learn advanced math on her own to solve the Abraxas conjecture and make it to Trantor. This sounds similar to a character named Yugo, who Harry Seldon encountered when he visited the lower levels on Trantor. He found him working in the heat sinks, which is this really brutal job. Class-wise, these workers were considered the lowest of the low and don't have access to quality education. In their interactions, Harry realized that Yugo was a brilliant mathematician, even though he never studied it. He had an innate ability to understand really complex ideas, and over the years, he became the second most important psychohistorian behind Seldon himself. In the AMA, David Goyer mentioned that Gaal was a combination of two characters, and this seems to point to her absorbing Yugo's role. It's a little confusing because everything important the character did happened before the original trilogy started, but I think the end of episode 5 gives us an idea how these two might still work together even after Harry's death. In the books, the last thing Gaal did was go to Terminus right before Harry died, after the encyclopedist had already been there for a while. There was no slow ship, Rach and Harry weren't there was no murder, there was no cryosleep, and of course there was no waking up on a ship where she catches a glimpse of a glitching hologram of Harry. We're still in the teasing stage of that, unfortunately. We don't really know what was going on there yet, but personally I think Harry did die, but there's something going on where his consciousness will continue, and we'll see him do some of the things he did towards the end of the prequel as far as setting things up at the same time that things are happening on Terminus and back on Trantor. In the books, Harry played a continuing role, but he was only involved in that he pre-recorded messages that would help to explain things to members of the Foundation over the years. So things are going in a different direction for sure, but there is an opportunity for Gaal to do some of the things Yugo did, which were essential to Harry's plan. On Terminus, things have been feeling pretty different compared to the books all the way around, but we did get a couple of things that were recognizable in the last 2 weeks. In my last video, I already went into how the Salvor character and the Vault were different, and talked about how Cleon attacking Anacreon really changed things up. Those things all continue to go in their own directions in episode 5 and 6, but before we get into that, I just want to mention again what Goyer said about Salvor. I went over this in my season 2 AMA video, but in case you haven't seen that, he said that our Salvor is not the fully formed Salvor of the books. This is her origin story. We're picking her up a good 20 years before the Salvor that appears in the Encyclopedists. She hasn't yet internalized the teaching of her father, etc. So as I said before, in the show we heard the saying, violence is the last refuge of the incompetent. They changed it so that it was her father's saying. And now that we've seen him die, and that seems like it's going to be a big turning point for the character, it's a safe bet that she's going to adopt this as her way of being going forward, once she gets the whole idea of revenge for his death out of her system. The showrunner also assured fans in the AMA that there were no chosen one characters in the story, but that they were playing with the concept of people feeling like they might be and other people believing they might be. That seems to be directly related to what we saw going on between Salvor and Yugo after his death. In the last 2 episodes, we saw what looked a lot like a crisis as we watched Anacreon's plan unfold. In the show's version of events, they're desperate because of Cleon's attack, and their quest for revenge, their plan for that, includes getting a hold of an actual Imperial soldier, which we saw them get in Dorwin. The whole thing left Terminus stuck in the middle, as they're an outpost of the Empire and they were used as bait. In the books, the first crisis was also with Anacreon, but the political situation was completely different. They were starting to act independently from the Empire, and they were starting to take over the other planets in their general vicinity. Book Salvor and the Encyclopedist were facing a military threat, but it never got to the point of Terminus City being attacked. One thing the show did introduce that came from the books was the Invictus. There, the ship played a large role in the Second Seldon Crisis, which happened a few decades later when Salvor was older. From that, it looks like the show's combining the first 2 crises together, or at least some of the elements. So it's an Imperial ship in both places, but the emphasis on it being a planet killer seems more important to the Anacreons on the TV show. If they can take control of it, they might be able to do some real damage to Trantor, maybe even destroy Trantor, which would be a huge blow for the Empire. So we'll have to see where they go with it. It's not exactly the same as how it's introduced in the book, so we'll see what happens. To come back to this idea that there are no chosen one characters in the show, the big thing that has made Salvor seem special is that she's able to approach the vault and doesn't feel the effects of the null field. Ever since the second episode aired, I've been guessing that the zygote that Gaal and Rach put into storage was a sign that they'd end up being Salvor's parents. Her having visions that include Rach seem like further evidence, and really there hasn't been anything to make me change my mind. As more people are starting to come around to this, I've seen an interesting theory in the comments a couple of times that might turn out to be correct. The visions seem to be coming from the vault, which was always going to be there waiting for the Encyclopedists when they arrived. Gaal was supposed to be with them, and it's possible that Harry's plan involved her being the one who could access the vault when the time came. If Salvor does end up being her daughter, then it could be some sort of biometrics or DNA related security, something like the fence around Terminus, that allows her access and gives her that connection. We're not sure how the visions work yet, but they could be tied to Harry's consciousness if that's still around. And this is something that I'll come back around to in the book spoilers section. Everything else that's been going on has been related to the Cleons, which don't appear in the books at all. Like I mentioned last time, the young Cleon being different isn't directly related to anything that happened in the books. And in the AMA, there was mention that he incorporated some of Leopold I's story, but there's nothing I can really say about that wouldn't be future spoilers. The Luminous Church is also a show-only thing. It seems like they serve to show that the Cleons don't control every part of their citizens' lives. Luminism offers people reincarnation, a chance to come back and live another life. Their death is not the end, and although that can be useful to the Empire to keep people happy, he has no control over it. So when we see Halima rising and bringing up this idea of stagnation, which is a really big part of why the Empire is falling, it puts him in an awkward situation, and it reinforces that idea to us as viewers. What's most interesting to me is the Demerzel connection, but again, there's nothing I can really talk about there that wouldn't be future spoilers. So I think this is a good place to leave the book to show section where I don't talk about spoilers. And this is your chance to leave because I'll be spoiling some future plot points from now until the end of the video. If you gotta go, please do like and subscribe on your way out. So I still feel like they combined Salvor with Wanda and that she'll probably turn out to be a mentalic, but it's all a little muddier now. Gaal's taking on Yugo's story would make sense if she's able to interact with Harry, and they could come up with the idea of the second foundation and get that going. She did tell Rach the math was incomplete. Perhaps that would be where they start, or it could be that Rach was intended to start the second foundation and that he was going to Helicon to recruit someone, or just start it there instead of Trantor, since we have an active story on the capital planet with the Cleons. Thinking that the vault was set up for her and Rach was supposed to be where she is now seems to track, but then the Mentalics and the founding of the second foundation could go a couple of different ways, so we'll just have to wait and see. I had a feeling we wouldn't see Harry in the next episode after that cliffhanger, but he is in the thumbnail of the next episode, so we should get an idea of what's going on soon. It's funny because Demerzel is such a wild card at this point. People who've read the books are thinking things like she started Luminism. They see this religion, it could have been her because of her age. It would be possible. Or that she's behind the changes that are happening with Cleon the 14th. And again, she is in charge of the cloning program, so you can see it. So yeah, she could be. She could be all those things. She definitely could be. I guess I just hope that she's not behind every mystery that pops up, other than, that she's literally behind everything. There's a real chance of it getting worn out fast for those of us who've read the series. Hopefully they can keep us on our toes, I guess is what I'm saying. I came away from the most recent episode of the podcast thinking there's something else going on, something outside of what we know from the books, but I have no idea where it's heading. Goyer had previously said the laws of robotics exist in the story, but that doesn't mean that Demerzel is currently bound by them. In the podcast, he mentioned that she, and then corrected to say they, because as a robot, there's no fixed gender, had agency in the past, but now there's some programming protocols in play, which he didn't really explain. It does sound like there's something going on there, probably back to the time of Cleon the First, and I'm interested to see where that goes. And I will leave things there. Let me know in the comments what you think about all of this. Just be conscious to mark any book spoilers. Please like this video if you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon.